So I was minding my own business, lying on a couch, watching YouTube, when suddenly a wild iPhone X Defense video appears. Normally, most of you guys know already my stance on the iPhone X and why I switched to the Galaxy S8. I already made a video covering the topic, but I decided to watch the video anyways. This is my response.
Hey, listen here.
Okay.
I knew people would be disappointed with this year's iPhone. That was no surprise to me.
That's not surprise to anyone. Actually, that's not surprise to anyone who isn't a fanboy, I should say.
They're disappointed every year.
And for a good reason. Apple disappoints every year, but the fans, loyal fans, keep giving them excuses and chances and keep buying phone after phone after phone, where they're basically all the same thing with minor upgrades. So of course, people expected 10th anniversary iPhone to be something huge. And the rest is self-explanatory.
We get the Jax Films parodies every year. We get the iPhone 10 rants every year. All the headlines saying, I'm not buying the iPhone 10 and you shouldn't either.
Once again, for a good reason.
I know, but I'm still the top defense lawyer for Apple, okay?
Good for you. Hope they're paying you something.
Just because I knew this would happen doesn't mean I can't complain.
Of course you can. You can make video about any subject you want. That's the freedom of YouTube. At least for now.
This is your Apple Sheep's defense rant of the iPhone 10. Let's begin.
Can't wait.
So I've nailed down some of the top complaints I've seen with the iPhone 10, and I'm here today to explain to you why you shouldn't worry about them.
Looks like you did some research, so I'm eager to see what kind of points you'll bring up.
Or why you shouldn't be too concerned, and why, while we've been thinking about the iPhone 10 for the past couple days, Apple's been thinking about it for the past 12 months. So it's possible they may know a thing or two that we don't.
True. Apple have been thinking about it and actually knows more about it than us. Still, there are a few points which are clear. So let's not act surprised when some people counter those points and actually present a good counter argument.
Let me debunk some things today. So the first big complaint, probably the top one, is Face ID. People are unsure about the removal of Touch ID. Everyone's for sure said that a fingerprint reader is so much easier to understand than unlocking with your face.
Because it is. At least for a lot of people. It's just a touch of a button. How fast Touch ID readers are on both the iPhone 6s, which I have, and namely Galaxy S7 and 8. It's not surprised that people prefer the Touch ID.
We've been using Touch ID for a while. In fact, Apple was kind of the company that made Touch ID normal and made it the gold standard of security on smartphones.
Hold on. Apple did not make anything normal or invented. There were Touch IDs on Android phones before it. And I know your counter argument. Yes, technically Apple did not invent Touch ID, but they made it standard and everybody's doing it. If by everybody you mean the cheap knockoff phones from China. Eventually, Touch ID was gonna spread, whether Apple existed or not. So let's not act like Apple made it standard. I bet the next video you're gonna say that Apple made Face ID standard as well.
There were fingerprint readers before Touch ID, but it wasn't really that common. And now Apple thinks they found a better way.
No, Apple didn't think they found a better way. What actually happened is they wanted to incorporate the Touch ID to the screen, but couldn't for one reason or another, so they pushed Face ID instead.
But because when Craig Federighi first introduced it, they had a little bit of a mishap, which was quite embarrassing. I watched the keynote live, I live streamed it live, you guys were there. You saw me, I was laughing.
Good for you, mate.
Because it was quite embarrassing.
Yes, it was.
And it definitely made a lot of people think, what exactly went on there? And if we see that part of the keynote, we see that Craig was trying to show off for the first time in a demo how Face ID worked, and sadly he couldn't get it to, which resulted in him saying the whole, oh, wait a minute, and then nervously wiping his face.
Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho.
Let's, go to backup here.
Now, channels like Unbox Therapy are saying that he was worried because of behind-the-scenes things where Face ID wasn't ready yet, and he was trying to wipe his face clean so that Face ID would work. And they're thinking that perhaps if your face is too oily, then Face ID won't work. I really don't think that's what it is at all. I just think that Craig had an absurd amount of stress on him.
An absurd amount of stress won't make you sweat suddenly.
First of all, if Apple's going to promise that Face ID will work when you have different amounts of facial hair, it learns and adapts to your face as you go on, it works with glasses, it works as you get older. Like, if they're saying it's this reliable, I don't think simple sweat is going to make the difference. And if it does, then they are blatantly lying to us.
Apple said it, therefore it must be true. Because of course Apple never lied to anybody.
And typically if Apple announces a feature like Face ID that's pretty major, it means they've tested it, and it means they've tried it at least a couple times.
Of course they did! Nobody said they didn't. What people are arguing is that Face ID is not perfect. At least not the perfect way Apple claims it is.
I don't think they would tell us that Face ID is this accurate and this useful when it wasn't really. I don't think banks would sign up for Apple Pay if they knew that Face ID was a theory and Apple never quite figured it out.
Once again, nobody is arguing that Apple didn't figure it out. What we're arguing about is that it's not as perfect as Apple is saying.
You know, that's part of the reason why I think it's delayed, is they're trying to work out the kinks. But of course, Apple also issued a statement of what went on that stage, and they clarified that Face ID did not fail, but the setup for the demo was simply not arranged properly. They're claiming that that iPhone on stage was designed to unlock to Craig's face. However, while that phone was being set up, whoever the guys were on stage that were plugging it in and putting it on the stand were accidentally setting off Face ID numerous times, and as it was designed to, it locked up because it was reading so many faces that weren't Craig.
That's a horrible excuse. You know why? I work in an environment with a lot of people and I leave my phone on the table, so if somebody by mistake walks by or somebody sitting next to me looks at my phone, it will lock out after a few attempts to detect me and other people. That's a horrible way to implement Face ID. At least make it so that you have to swipe up like the Galaxy S8 and then cameras start detecting people.
Craig, similar to testing a fingerprint, it required a passcode because it thought it was being stolen. That's why when that phone asked for a passcode on stage, it said, your passcode is required to enable Face ID, meaning that Face ID wasn't trying to activate. If it was, that lock on the front would probably shake back and forth and say, you know, not my owner's face. Something like that. So we know that Face ID was not actually failing, and I don't think Craig was actually trying to clean his face off to make sure that it worked.
Whatever he was trying to do, it was cringeworthy.
Because he very quickly, and Apple very smartly, had a backup phone right next to it.
Why did they have a backup phone next to it? As far as I can retell, and please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, this is actually the first time they have a backup device next to it. Or at least that's what I think. Maybe they had it hidden somewhere in the previous shows. So back to my point, why would they have a backup device if they're sure that Face ID works perfectly and everything works perfectly?
They switched over to that next phone, and I wish the media would cover this more often. He unlocked it 3 to 4 times with his face, and it worked flawlessly. I was just glad that they had a backup phone ready in case something went wrong. Overall, that whole Face ID mishap lasted a matter of like 5 seconds. And yet everyone blows up about it, says Face ID is a failure.
Because it failed. For one reason or another, it failed.
Guys, it was just a little setup error. If you recall when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone 4, he was trying to show how much faster it was internet-wise than the iPhone 3GS. And on stage, the 3GS actually started beating the iPhone 4 because there were so many devices on the Wi-Fi network.
I remember that cringy scene. So he basically got angry and told people to get off Wi-Fi because, yeah, that's a real life scenario that you can do. Hey everybody, I'm in an airport and my phone is not picking up the signal, so please everybody shut off your Wi-Fi and shut off your devices. And you know what? Stay away from me at least 10 miles radius so my phone can work perfectly.
In there. So don't act like big problems like this have never happened before. And again, this wasn't failure on the hardware. This was just a failure on setting up. I think once we do get Face ID at the beginning of November, we can truly start testing it.
First point that I totally agree with. We need to test it out and then either ride the Apple hype train or dismantle it on YouTube.
Seeing if it can be fooled in photographs, Apple says it won't. Seeing if identical twins can log into each other's phone. Seeing if John Cena can log into his phone.
That's actually funny, even though I read it 100 times online.
And there's even statements saying that it will work with most sunglasses. There may be some sunglasses that are too big that will prevent you from unlocking the phone, and I imagine that because sunglasses block out light, Face ID might have a problem because it doesn't know when your eyes are open, but they said for the most part it'll work just fine, and I just want everyone to cool it with Face ID, okay? Let's wait till it's out to officially compare it to Touch ID, but personally I think it's gonna be a lot better.
Yeah, I think you're right. I actually agree. Let's pipe down and actually test the thing once it's out.
Better. The next big complaint is a lot about how the power button is going to work. I keep seeing comments saying, how do you turn off this phone? Because they think holding the power button activates Siri and double tapping it activates Apple Pay. You guys, just clicking it once still turns it off. That's not changed. And in fact, pressing that button once also turns the display off. Apple has added new ways of turning on the phone, so they're kind of thinking there's not much of a point to anymore.
Accidental on-off triggering Siri.
A lot of people forgot that mention in the keynote. You can turn on an iPhone X can just by tapping the screen.
And that's a horrible way to wake up a phone. That just screams accidental ons and offs while the phone is in my pocket, in the purse, or even touching it by mistake. That's a horrible way to wake up a phone. Double tap, on the other hand, like again, the Galaxy S8 is something Apple should have done. And I believe it will be patched via an update.
It has a tap to wake feature similar to the Apple Watch. If it's not on and you simply tap it, it just wakes up. And I think the iPhone 10 will work in a similar way. That way you don't always have to rely on raise to wake. But then also there is raise to wake. So whenever you lift up the phone, it's going to activate automatically, scan your face, and then hopefully be able to unlock so you can swipe up when you need to. And while some people may think that's more complicated,
it is more complicated. Apple could have simplified, choosing one way or another to avoid accidental wake-ups.
Keep in mind that in the demos, there were no notifications on that lock screen. It would be rather annoying if every time you picked up your phone and started reading some of the notifications on the lock screen, it registered your face and just opened automatically. Then you wouldn't be able to read anything. That was a major problem with Touch ID on the iPhone 6s. Back before iOS 10 and we had press home to open, people would put their fingerprint on the home button just to turn their phone on, and because Touch ID was so fast, it opened really quick and you couldn't really read all your notifications.
That's why I always use the power button to read my notification on my iPhone 6s. The Touch ID was indeed very fast.
That were on your lock screen. That's why there's that extra step. So please don't worry about the power button. They've added a couple more features to it, but it still turns the phone on and off. And again, you can do raise to wake and you can tap the display just to turn it on anyway.
I agree. Accidental wake-ups though.
Next big complaint is about the notch.
This thing is ugly as hell. Even you should not defend it. Even a hardcore Apple fanboy should not defend it. This is a failure at its highest. The Essential phone looks much sexier, cleaner, and modern than this. I'm sorry, I would rather have a small bezel for the whole thing on both sides than this. And I bet you my life, next year's iPhone 11 will not have this unibrow.
And I'll admit, I was a bit surprised how much Apple just kind of embraced it. You know, this is kind of the first display from Apple we've seen before that is so irregular, to have such a big cutout at the top. And a lot of people are worried because in all the demos and in all the videos and all the marketing Apple released, it shows the display going completely around it. A lot of people are calling those top parts the ears. Whether you're watching movies or playing games, it just totally embraces the notch. What some people didn't realize if you watch some of the hands-on demos with the iPhone 10 is that similar to watching a movie on an iPad, if you double tap whatever video you're playing, it can zoom out and the notch will disappear. You'll have a little bit of black bars on the side because the phone is so wide when you're in landscape, but you have that option to have the notch be invisible. And again, keep in mind, they were demoing all these videos and photos within Apple's stock apps like Photos and Video. We don't know how YouTube and Netflix is going to handle it, and if I know them, the way they handle their apps on the Galaxy S8 and the Galaxy Note 8, they're going to provide an option. So YouTube will probably be okay with embracing the notch if you want to, or they'll have a button that turns it off so you don't have to always see the notch.
How about Apple eliminate the whole thing from the start, placing small bezels, small but necessary bezels, and we wouldn't have been talking about this thing.
And they'll just put blackness around the notch on both sides so you can still watch videos in 16:9. I don't think it's going to be a big thing to overcome. We've yet to see how Apple is going to handle a lot of the landscape features on the iPhone because of this notch, but I'm sure whatever they do is going to be fine. They think through these things, and anyway, this display is so incredibly wide when you're in landscape, it probably doesn't make much sense to try to read emails like this or try to use Safari when you're in such a wide display. This is above 16:9, so they might just say, you know what, don't do landscape. And honestly, I don't use landscape mode on my iPhone that often.
You're making excuses for Apple. Oh, it doesn't make any sense to read their emails or browse your apps with the whole wide thing. So people should not use it because you're not using it. Flawless logic right there.
I do it when I watch videos, but when I'm using Safari or when I'm texting, it's kind of impractical.
It's impractical to you. It's not impractical to the other person. If it was impractical to everybody, Apple would have not included it.
Okay, now the next big one is probably the biggest complaint with Apple in general is the price point.
Of course it is. You have to take a mini loan to buy an Apple phone now. So excuse the majority of people for freaking out.
For some reason, even though we had all these leaks of the iPhone 10's price, people were still surprised to find out that it costs $1,000 for 64 gigs, and it's a $150 increase for 256.
Because some people had some hope that Apple would somehow get back to their senses and knock down the price a bit. Knowing Apple, they will not do that, but some people had hopes.
So for the first complaint, people were upset that a storage upgrade costs $150. And usually with Apple, at least for a while, it's had a track record of if you want a storage improvement, it's an extra $100. But keep in mind, this isn't an ordinary storage improvement. Like for instance, before, if you had a standard 32 gigabyte iPhone, you paid $100 more and you got 64 gigs. You paid $100 more and you got 128. If we do some basic simple math here, we can deduct that you are doubling for $100.
No. I will not let you go there. How about Apple included the 128 gigabyte option from the start? Meaning that the 64 version is useless from the get-go, as 4K videos, as how they're pushing 4K 60 frames videos will fill up the phone in no time. And 64 is the new 16, meaning it's useless. So instead of giving the people a fairly reasonably priced 128 version, they give the people 256. They make people jump there so they can jack up the price. I'm yet to find any logical reason for not including the 128 gigabyte version.
32 to 64 costs another $100. This isn't that same scenario. With the iPhone 10, we're going from 64 to 256.
Why is that? How about you give me a 128 version?
That's 4 times the amount of storage than the standard.
Yes, it is, and some people don't want this huge amount of storage, and they also don't want the 64 tiny version. They want the 128, the middle ground.
So if we're doubling by 4, wouldn't it make more sense if it was $200 more?
How generous of Apple. After forcing people to take the 256 version, they discounted it by around $50.
That would be the more accurate variable of how Apple usually does these things, but I was actually quite surprised to find out that it's only $150 more for the 256.
I was actually surprised that they're pushing people to 256 version instead of giving them the 128.
Because that's a total of 4 64 gigabyte storages. It's not twice the size, it's 4 times the size, and it's only $150 more.
Yes, it is. Once again, some people don't want this amount of space, and they don't want to pay this huge amount of money for it.
For some reason, people were still upset about that. It's like, you're getting a lot.
And we don't want a lot. We just want our 128 version and pay what is equivalent to this amount. We don't want the 256. What's hard to understand?
It would make sense that it costs a little bit more than $100, right? I thought that was obvious.
Yes, it does make sense to cost more for more storage. What doesn't make any sense is why are Apple forcing people to get this much storage when they could have offered the 128 version for the millionth time.
Also something I really wanted to bring up because I feel like not everyone is addressing this. The iPhone 10 is kind of strategically priced higher than the 8.
So basically you admit right here, right now that Apple has a strategic scam.
If the iPhone 10 was cheaper, almost no one would really be interested in getting the 8.
Because the iPhone 8 is basically an iPhone 7S.
If the price points were closer, like for instance, if the iPhone 10 was $900 and the iPhone 8 Plus was $800, it's like they're so close. Why would anyone have any incentive to buy an iPhone 8?
So your solution to this is to jack up the prices.
Now, I'm not saying that the iPhone 10 is cheap to build. I'm sure it's very expensive, but I'm just saying part of this high price point is to keep people interested in the 8. They want to see the 8 as a bargain. You know, starting at $700 isn't that bad. For all the things you're getting with the 8.
For all the things you're getting with the 8, that's a great deal. Oh wait, what things are you getting? That's basically an iPhone 7S, which is basically an iPhone 7, which is basically an iPhone 6S, which is basically...
I think that's a great deal. So to try to spread demand out a little bit and say, no, the iPhone 8 is still worth it. They're saying this more premium iPhone, this iPhone that's gonna be more about the future.
So basically, the iPhone 8 is not our future. And iPhone 10 has all the new features, so why not get that?
That one, yes, costs an extra $200 than a regular 8 Plus. It's not just about Apple's greed. Some of this is actually strategy.
So it's not greed, it's strategic greed.
And because the iPhone 10 is so hard to build and because it's so low in stock, it actually kind of helps to say, no, this is more expensive.
So it's not expensive because it has insane amount of features or build quality. It's expensive to push the iPhone 8 sales up. Nice.
Because that keeps demand lower. Even though it's incredibly high, that $1,000 price point definitely cuts off a lot of customers from being able to afford it.
Yes, it does.
Which may be a bit sad, but when quantities are so low, it's kind of what you have to do.
No, it's not what we have to do. Apple could have made iPhone 10 the standard iPhone 8.
And now number 5, the 5th big thing I keep seeing people complain about, which is something we hear every year, and I'm just mind-boggled while we still talk like this, but everyone keeps saying not much is due. Nothing about the iPhone 10 is unique. All of it is stuff we've seen before.
And they are correct. Everything the iPhone 10 offered was already available on other Android phones.
And first of all, I say, well, no.
Well, yes.
Apple has never really been the company to introduce features for the first time.
Thank you.
No, they didn't invent Touch ID. No, they didn't invent unlocking your phone with your face. They didn't invent stereo speakers or waterproofing or even an edge-to-edge display. But from the beginning, what Apple has been known for is reinventing what's present and making it modern.
That's not what every Apple keynote says. They're pretending and pushing the idea that they invented the things and are introduced in the tech world for the first time.
So for instance, like Face Unlock is on the Galaxy S8. I know it wasn't introduced on that, but for example, it basically uses the same technology that Facebook does to just auto-detect a human face and say, that is the same face as earlier, which means it can be tricked by a photograph, but Apple wanted this to be held at a higher standard. So with this, it's a 3D map of your face. That's why when you set it up, you have to look all around. It means that you can't be tricked with a photograph.
We're yet to see that. We first have to see how the Face ID really works in real life scenarios, and then we can judge.
This is far more secure. And while no, Apple did not invent wireless charging, they're kind of the first to say, let's add wireless charging to all arrays of devices. That way, when that amazing device called AirPower,
we're giving Apple nicknames to products that already existed again.
Want one so bad, is able to come out, you'll simply have one plug into the wall that can wirelessly charge both your phone, your watch, and your AirPods all on the same mat. Now, we've seen Samsung do stuff like that, but not quite to that scale.
So basically, yes, they already did it, but as an Apple fanboy, I'm gonna say it's not that good because Apple didn't do it that time. Now that they did implement it, it's an amazing technology.
I've messed with S Gear, I've messed with Galaxy phones wireless charging, but to have one of the best wireless headphones, AirPods, as well as the #1 smartwatch in the world, the Apple Watch, and now one of the most popular smartphones, all charge on the same plate, I think that's so genius.
Not an Apple fanboy at all. Everything Apple does to you is genius.
This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.
This is Adam3K3. Like the video, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and I'll talk to you in my next video.